Welcome to the Mockingbird Sessions guitar panel. We're here celebrating 25 years of the Mockingbird Foundation supporting music education for children. I'm Stephanie Jenkins. I'm a philosophy professor and director for the Mockingbird Foundation. I'm so excited to be here today with three incredible guitarists, Nels Cline, Scott Metzger, and Ari Joshua. We're here to discuss music education, improvisation, and all things guitar. Nels, Scott, and Ari, thank you so much for joining us today for this dialogue.
Thank you.
Yes.
So to begin our conversation about the guitar in general for today, I'm hoping that we can start out by asking you all, what drove you to this particular instrument?
Who wants to go first?
Well, I'm the oldest here, so I'm going to go to say the obvious stuff, which is that I grew up in Los Angeles, California. When I was 10 years old, it was 1965. I heard the Byrds' Turn, Turn, Turn album as my ne'er-do-well friend Mitch and our sort of ne'er-do-well other friends in this apartment building that he lived in sat around trying to be like tough guys, smoking cigarettes and listening to the Byrds over and over again. Somewhere along the line, my twin brother Alex also got obsessed with the Rolling Stones, and we met a boy at school named Pat Pyle, who had an amazing drum technique already, and had a snare drum. And the combination of rock and roll on the radio, rock and roll on the stereo, and that snare drum, which had me and my brother grinning ear to ear as he showed us drum rudiments, led me to a life of music.
Yeah, for me, I think it was the first concert that I ever saw, which was the Ramones in Trenton, New Jersey, at a real famous, now defunct club called City Gardens. It's kind of an underground, legendary place. But I was already very into music, and I was in like the school band and playing saxophone. At that point, I was in about the 9th grade, but I hadn't started playing the guitar yet. And I went to that show, and I remember I stood right in front of Johnny Ramone's amps that night, and I couldn't believe what I was experiencing when he started playing, just the power of him playing. And I just decided that night, I have to learn how to do that, And that was that was about 1994, I guess. But I can still remember that night like it was last week. It had that big of an effect on me, for sure. And I went home and I just started doing everything I had to do to start to make that happen, started saving money and bought a guitar and learned every Ramones song under the sun after that. And here I am.
Love it.
Yeah, for me, I did go to a couple really amazing shows. I mean, I say this to my students and to my music friends all the time, but I feel like I grew up in kind of a really special golden era of music. And I feel bad for the younger kids now, just because I had so much music going on when I was, same age, around, 14, 13 years old. I got to see all the jazz legends while they were around, and growing up in Seattle, I had the grunge thing going on. I saw the Dead and I saw Fish, all this stuff right in that golden 13, 14, 15, area. But what got me into the guitar, is my dad's record collection, really. It's like my parents got divorced when I was pretty young, and so in a way, like the way I had a connection with my dad, since he wasn't in the house, he left his record collection, and he had this incredible, amazing record collection of like Hendrix and all this jazz and great stuff. And I remember the record player and just the dots on it kind of spinning around and just listening to those records. And I was just mesmerized, and I just sort of almost knew right away. I mean, I remember like hanging out with him at a young age, and he would put like, you know, a record on or a tape on, and it would be Hendrix, and the way his face would light up when, you know, talking about the music. And I instantly like knew when I heard, almost like I think Voodoo Child or something, and I was like, you know, how's he getting that sound, you know? So I got into it pretty young. My parents made me play piano for a while, and I didn't want to play piano. I really wanted to play guitar, you know? And the guy up the street ended up buying me a guitar when I was about 12, and that's how I got started.
Excellent. Well, I have to say, for me, the moment that I knew I wanted to play guitar for my life has to do with Jimi Hendrix. And I was messing around. I mean, it's very important, I think, to note that in 1967, there was, you know, no rock and roll acceptability in societies at that point. You know, it was still basically a kind of rebel music, and the top 30 and top 40 radio was wide open. So it's this kind of combination of a lot of really safe kind of music, you know, hits like Ed Ames or Engelbert Humperdinck or Lulu. But then at the same time, James Brown, Smokey Robinson, and the Yardbirds, and this man, Jimi Hendrix, who just happened to appear on the radio one afternoon on KHJ, I believe, the top 30. There were two stations, KRLA and KHJ. One was top 30, one was top 40. And for some reason, the DJ on a Saturday afternoon played Manic Depression instead of Purple Haze, which was the single off of Are You Experienced? And my twin brother and I, we had seen this record in the stores, but we hadn't heard it, and we just thought this has to be the coolest record ever, you know.
Yeah.
But we hadn't heard it. We had used to buy records just based on what they looked like in many instances, because the underground wasn't on the radio, and we wanted to know what all the psychedelic hippies were listening to and doing. But we knew right away when Manic Depression came on that it was that Jimi Hendrix record, because we could tell it was a trio. There's something about the timbre of his voice. We just said, like, that's that black guy on the cover of the record with the eye jacket, you know. And we were literally running around, jumping up and down. And when it got to the part where Jimmy sings along with his guitar right before the guitar solo, that ascending part, that was it. That was a life of guitar for me.
Yeah.
And it still has, like you're describing, the things that still have the same effect on you when you think about that moment, Scott, that Ramones moment. That moment on that Saturday afternoon around the Garrard Hi-Fi is etched in my mind as clearly now as ever.
Yeah, it's amazing. For me, the Ramones holdover is that whenever I get a new speaker put into an amp, or if I get a new amp and need to break in the speaker, my tradition is to take it to my rehearsal space, put it at about 9 or 10 on the volume, and play Ramones songs for 3 hours. And it's incredible, because it's really the best to break in a speaker, because it's just, you know, it's just so severe. It's relentless. But it is incredible, because every time that I do that, which will happen about once every 2 years or so, that I have to break in a new speaker for one reason or another. And it's amazing how I'm always reminded that I'm just immediately transported back to that feeling of when I was 16 years old. Like, the feeling is exactly the same as it was in '94.
I love how vivid your memories are of these experiences, right? Because it really drives home how significant they were for you. In terms of your own playing, in your experience as like a young musician, do you have any standout memories from that part of your career of connecting with the guitar?
I had no career then, so I don't know. I was just a guy who wanted to play guitar. I never even thought about a career. I just thought about playing. I still do, really.
I got a great thing that's it's super relevant with the Hendrix, but when I got my first guitar, it actually was called the Terminator, and it had a built-in speaker, and it was from a catalog, because, you know, obviously before the internet, you know. The first thing I learned was the Star Spangled Banner, because I had the VHS of Hendrix, and just watching him sort of play that music, you know, just the electricity of it. It just sort of, it was something that, you know, all this, like, sort of that, and watching musicians, for me, I instantly sort of recognized sort of what they were dealing with, which I think I now realize is more unique for a kid than I thought. But I remember, like, I learned the Star Spangled Banner, but the guitar was out of tune, so I learned it, and then I'd have to relearn it the next day, right? Because I didn't know how to even tune the guitar. And at some point, I just had this moment where, like, there was, like, the basketball court behind my house, where for a while I wanted to be a basketball player, and I practiced my basketball hoops back there. And I went back there one day, and I had this moment where I, like, smashed the guitar because I couldn't tune it. I had gotten a new one, and, you know, by that time figured it out. But I was like 12 years old. But, like, I mean, obviously, like, the Hendrix thing was just, like, super impactful. But I guess that's my moment.
Yeah, I just had no desire to be a flamboyant guitarist like Jimi Hendrix. It's just that it was the excitement, the literal electricity of his sound and of that music and those songs, and so I deigned to take what I guess would be considered a more modest path, and sort of model myself on guitarists who I thought at the time, with me knowing nothing about whatever jazz music was, had a jazzy sort of melodic quality, and blues players. So I was really interested in Duane Allman later, since the first Allman Brothers record, because by then there was underground FM radio in Southern California by 1969, 70. And so Duane and well, I love Stephen Stills, for example, who I think is still a very underrated guitar player. And his playing on a song like Deja Vu, or the song Bluebird, had a big impact on me. And so I kind of wanted to be more like those guys, and then just see Jimmy as this deity, actually, a shaman.
Yeah. I mean, all roads lead to Hendrix in a way. It's like any electric guitar talk always will end up, you know, everybody's common ground is always Hendrix. You know, for me, it was that I went, so I was like playing all these power chords at this point. There was a head shop in the town that I grew up in called Now and Then Music. And, you know, they sold, you know, Red Hot Chili Pepper t-shirts in the back. They had like a wall of all these, like, you know, Jerry Garcia Band t-shirts, and you could buy, you know, rolling papers in this place, the lava lamps and all that. But they also had like a small CD section and in the front, and they had a VHS tape of one called Jimmy Plays Berkeley. It was called.
Oh yeah.
And it was VHS.
Yeah.
And the guy at the store recommended, he was like, well, if you want to get good at guitar, you know, he's like, you know, the Ramones and the stuff that you're playing is cool and all, but if you want to go next level, like, this is really where it's at. So he recommended that to me, and I bought it, kind of not knowing what I was getting into. And I ended up wearing out that VHS, you know, tape. Like, literally, I broke the tape. I watched it so much. But it was sort of the same thing that you said. And I was like, that was something that was like totally, it was just on a whole other level. Like, there was no way I was going to go out and buy a bunch of bandanas and, you know, bell-bottom pants and stuff. Right? That just wasn't me. But there was something that was like super, super addictive about it. You know, it was like, I just can't believe what I'm seeing.
Yeah. I remember, like, finding out, you know, who I had, like, a teacher would sort of recommend, but, like, finding out who Hendrix listened to and going backwards, you know, and that was sort of like another thing, like, you know, who did he study to become who he was, you know, and then listening to the old blues guys, that was a great journey until about high school, when I got in a jazz band similar to you. Like you said, you were growing up playing like wind instruments. Is that what you said?
Scott.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, yeah, jazz. Then it sort of like went like from blues, like Hendrix back to blues, and then all of a sudden I got in the jazz band, and all of a sudden it's like a whole new world of music.
Discovery of jazz for me ended up being like the repudiation of rock for a while, because after Duane Allman was killed, and and I know what you're describing, going to concerts when you were that young. We couldn't get to any of the concerts that we wanted to hear. We were too young. But we were able to go to the Lighthouse in Hermosa Beach, which was all ages, and hear an amazing array of jazz legends. Mm-hmm. But that wasn't until we were able to drive, because nobody was going to take us to any of these shows. We had to get ourselves there. And so when I heard Africa by John Coltrane, there was just this moment where I didn't even understand what was happening and why I didn't know about this music sooner. And that set me on a whole other path until, I guess, and progressive rock. I got interested in progressive rock because I liked long form music. I liked all these sensations and nice long instrumental passages, So I wasn't able to hold these ideas in my head at the same time of blues and rock and roll, which at that time was like glam rock was becoming really popular with my friends, and a lot of my friends were just following the Grateful Dead around at this point, and I had lost interest in the Grateful Dead. I did see them in '71, which was a very good concert, but I just couldn't keep these things in my head at the same time. It took what I might term maturity to put it all back together. Stephanie, I know you've been wanting to ask us something.
I've been fascinated by your discussion of your influences and appreciating the historical nature of that. But I'm also wondering about kind of your own playing and the process by which you developed your own voice as a guitarist. So I'm going to preface this question by saying that I read an interview with Scott in which he said that and this answer actually surprised me, that he's still working on finding his identity and voice as a musician. So maybe enough time has passed that we can update that or not. But if you think about cultivating your own style, right, how have you gone about that process? Whether it's you feel like you found it or you're still searching for it?
Definitely still searching. I mean, I think that it's an ongoing thing. I think that most of us would agree. It's like, I don't know if it's ever like a destination, like a final destination kind of situation. It'd be weird to wake up one morning and feel like, I did it. I made it. I did it. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's that's the whole reason that I love it, is that I don't feel like that it's nailed down, or that I don't feel like that it's a completed thing. It's like kind of like I keep having these aha moments through the years where I'll have sort of one moment that will sort of lead me into a whole new, you want to call it phase or whatever, or era of stuff that maybe people don't even hear on the outside world, but in my mind, it's like I'm going into this whole other exploratory phase of my life. And maybe it's thinking more about sound for a couple of years, or more about rhythm for a couple of years, or whatever. And I'm never quite sure how if that translates or not. But I certainly don't feel like it's usually that I think that my process, or part of my process, is that I'm finding that I just keep kind of getting rid of stuff. Like I'll hear myself back and I'll decide, this like 30 seconds, I'll listen to like a 3-hour J-Rag show or something. I'll be like, this about maybe 4 minutes total was like pretty okay of those 3 hours. And what was wrong with the other part? Like, what isn't connecting for me about what I was doing with the other bits? And usually it's that like I'm either overplaying or just kind of trying to play a little too far outside of myself or something like this. So it's kind of more of like a focusing, very, very long-term, lifelong focusing in on ideas and execution, I guess.
I just want to say, one thing, I had some really great teachers from a young age, and in general. I really appreciate everything you said, though. By the way, that was really cool about taking stuff away. That's a cool insight to an artist's mind. I think one thing that I learned that really rings true and continues to ring true is that when you hear that, finding your sound is sort of about, you hear something that moves you emotionally. You hear an artist express themselves. One thing about all the great artists is that they're all there's a potency to them. And a lot of that is about their uniqueness and their, imperfections and just who they are and how they're expressing themselves. So, what I believe and what I was kind of taught is you hear something that moves you on a record, or you see someone play, and then you emulate what they did, sort of as you're developing as an artist, or at least that's how I kind of found my sound. And I've got the thought. So basically, the idea is just that, you hear something that moves you emotionally, you try to emulate the way that the person expressed it. And then as you do that with all the different people that move you, that becomes your sound. So, for me, it became, it started with Hendrix, and I was trying to, I learned it from the records because we didn't really have tabs and stuff like that at that time, and the internet to search other people playing riffs, which is what a lot of kids do these days. Then when I got into jazz, it was like, oh, I'm going to listen to some Charlie Parker or some, Johnny Hodges, even like from Ellington, like the way he, just the way that people like would express the very like expression of a note through a horn. There's more inflections you can put through a horn than through a guitar. So a lot of times guitar is just one dynamic, but there's just such a subtlety. So someone like Kenny Burrell, who's like a jazz guy, he would or Grant Green, they would get this tone out of the instrument. So learning, how can I emulate the way this person's expressing themselves on a wind instrument, or how can I emulate the way these guys are sounding, and taking a little bit from every person, and eventually, if you're following the feeling of it, I think eventually you end up with your vocabulary, how to express your emotions. And that sort of is, in my mind, the epitome of, what's guided me to find my sound, and what continues to be my beacon for searching for, a better sound or a better way to express myself. So that's the continuation. Pass it on.
Very good. I don't think I have a style, by the way, a recognizable style. So when people interview me and mention it, I don't know what the heck they're talking about, because I ended up being this kind of polymath shapeshifter dude, which was never my intention. That developed from me wanting to play different kinds of music because of the different artists that I was able to collaborate with, or they wanted me to play guitar with them, and I liked what they were doing. But a lot of times they had ideas about what I should do that were very far from what I was thinking I would end up doing when I started playing. For example, I left sort of my bonehead version of blues rock guitar, where I played almost everything with these two fingers, and I was trying to learn chords, but cool chords, but I had nowhere to go. I got the Ted Green chord book. That didn't really help much. The Joe Pass chord book was useless because he doesn't actually notate any of the alterations of the chords. They just major, minor, diminished, augmented is all the only way he thought of them. That wasn't particularly helpful. No guitar teachers. I tried to learn guitar in high school from a couple of guys one of whom actually kind of psychologically destroyed me, and didn't show me. I never learned technique on the guitar. So, but I found myself being particularly inspired after my rock and roll sort of phase of trying to play original music, long instrumentals, listening to mostly chords, like listening to people like Ralph Towner play, or John Abercrombie play, or even listening to Mahavishnu Orchestra songs where the tonality and the harmonic content was what really was getting to me, maybe more than all the finger wiggling. And so that set me off on a path of what I thought was going to be the rest of my life. And then pretty soon there I am back playing rock and roll with Mike Watt or with the Geraldine Fibbers. And at one point I was asked on one song called Trash Man and Furs by the Geraldine Fibbers to play like a really earnest 14-year-old boy in his bedroom, trying to really get down on the guitar, but he's just not happening. You know, he's barely cutting it and he's kind of sucking. And so I said, great, I mean, I'll do that. And that's what I did. And I didn't know that this would be a weird skill to be kind of like a character changing musician. And sometimes I find this more satisfying than listening to anyone really play efficiently. And right now at age 65, one of the last things I want to hear is me playing a guitar solo. And I'm struggling with that now. And I don't know why that is, but I definitely don't think I have a style. And I think I just try to change what I'm doing to suit the situation that I'm in. And certainly if in the right setting and somebody looks at me and it's time to solo, I'm definitely going to go for it. But right now I'm probably not going to dig it too much. And I don't know why that is. But I don't think I have a sound and I don't think I have a style. But I do like really cool rhythms and interesting chords. I just want to play chords. I don't know. I really like playing chords and writing songs that have cool chords in them to my ear, you know, or drones. I just like a drone and without even any melodic content, just a timbre, you know, like a Tony Conrad electric drone or some kind of microtonal, you know, Indonesian drone. So I don't know where it's leading, but I guess I
gotta say, you know, we did that gig together in 2000. Now my sense of time is completely out of whack after this past year, but I guess that was the end of 2019.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, Nels and I and Billy Martin and John Metzger played a gig of 2 hours of just improvised music, and I don't know how anybody else feels about it, but to me that was it felt like a very, very grown-up gig of improvising, because what struck me was that in a lot of cases, if you get people together to just improvise, people are kind of, you know, jumping all over each other to get on solos. Like everybody's just soloing, and it's just like a solo fest. Like, okay, I soloed, now you solo, and now we're going to solo together and all this stuff. But it was so refreshing to play with, because I felt like that everybody sort of took that approach as to what you were just saying about not shying away from solos, but that not being the focus of what.
Yeah, it was an ensemble.
Exactly. Which is a cool, you know, I mean, not all guitar players think that way, right?
In a way, this is where electronics rescued me, I suppose, and looping and all these things that I like to do, because they take me into a sound realm and away from maybe the idea that I'm really saying something with my solo, which right now I'm highly suspicious of.
I just want to say that it's really beautiful, Nels, to hear you say things you're saying. It's like a really to share your vulnerability, sort of like in how you feel about it. And I know that a lot of incredible artists sort of end up feeling that way all the way. Like you get so shocked to hear interviews with some of your favorite artists and they're still, you know, searching for their sound. But yet, you know, I have handfuls of of students over the years and friends that love your sound. And personally, I mean, I wouldn't expect to hear you say that, because I feel like you do have an incredibly unique and awesome sound. But you know, just to speak to Scott's point about that improvisation session you guys had, when I was in college, one of my professors was George Garzone, and we had this free jazz. We had this free jazz class with him, you know, which was like, I remember like I couldn't get in because there was a couple of guitar players already in, and you know, guitar players are, like Scott's saying, like they don't always listen. And so he was kind of like, well, you play any other instruments? And, you know, I'm like, not really. And he's like, well, could you pick one up? And so I just kind of grabbed a mandolin and played it in the class. But I remember him saying like, no, the point isn't to like be the shining sound at the front of the room. He's like, the goal of this is to like have your eyes closed and listen to everything. And the winning sound in a way is the one that's in the back of the room, creeping in, like from the back of the room, you know, like just, you can just feel it. And if it belongs in the front of the room, it will sort of go there, you know.
It's way.
It's a beautiful sort of lesson on that type of group improvisation, you know.
George is just such an amazing guy. My only experiences with him were when my wife and I were doing some teaching at a thing in Denmark a couple of years ago, and he was there with the trio and just doing his thing, and just so incredibly open, but also very rigorous. Like there was nothing loosey-goosey about what he was doing and saying. It was very locked in and very he was very disciplined, but he like that openness you're describing and that kind of mindset affected a whole lot of people I know, and I'm really glad that I even had like a few minutes around that guy.
How do you all continue to challenge yourself in your playing? Is there something that you wanted to master that you haven't quite figured out yet, or something specific that you're working on?
Oh my God.
Tough questions.
Yeah. I mean, just picking up the guitar is a challenge for me every time. And thinking that I'm just going to do the same thing I did yesterday is kind of daunting. But God, I love the sound of guitar. Just do. And I love playing, you know, in spite of what sounds like I'm a head case. But I actually, once the music starts, that's why I even love sound checks. I like whatever. As soon as the sound cranks up, I'm a happy guy. But at home and thinking about what I need to do, there's a billion things I haven't done because I was somehow, like, I don't know, afraid to, lazy. I have no idea. Like my sight reading is still pathetic. And I would like to blame the guy that tried to teach me sight reading back in high school, but I really need to blame myself for not being intrepid enough to tell myself that guy wasn't going to crush me, you know, that jerk. But he did. You know, so I avoid it. You know, I avoid even writing out my own music to the last possible second. And then I do, and I go like, oh, what my problem is? It's not that bad. It's like not that hard. My charts are, they're okay. Tom Rainey, the beautiful, amazing drummer, likes to call my charts charming because they aren't always rhythmically quite accurate in certain areas. My imagination is far beyond my ability to notate. But I'm trying, you know. So that's the challenge. The challenge is just to keep going and not be daunted by all the stuff I don't know. But as soon as I start playing and people around me are playing, I'm in heaven usually.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to hear what Scott has to say too. But I mean, I for me, like right now, I feel like I've spent so much time practicing. You know, I think it ends up being that like it's what sort of soothes me so much. Like the music just, it's a chance for me to not be thinking and to just sort of be in the moment, and it's like almost like a medicine. And so I think just I'll never end up stop working on it because it's what I love to do. It's not so much that I like, there's something I want to do or want to get better at. It's just more like it's a practice. Like they say meditation is a practice, you know, my music is sort of like a practice, it feels like. So I'll always be working on it because it's what I like, you know.
Beautiful.
Yeah, well, I don't want to get too heady about everything here, but you know, to me, I sort of enjoy practicing. I like the showing up for it every day, and the process of that, I think. And I think part of that has to do with that I'm somebody who, you know, it's a personal thing, but I'm sober, and I've been sober for 15 years. And one of the things that you learn in early sobriety is like you sort of have to show up for yourself every day. That's one of the things that you're sort of taught, you know, ground rules of it. And to me, sort of practicing a little bit every day is kind of like a humble way of showing up for myself, I guess, every day, to say it in one way. So what I don't have anything specific to say about stuff that I want to master or anything, but my process for that is that I always have my ear out for something that sounds like that I'll hear someone play something on the instrument, and my gut knee-jerk reaction is like, oh, I'll never be able to do that. I could never, ever do that. And then I would force myself to go after that thing, and very slowly, I mean, like I just finished learning a Bach 2-part invention, like playing both parts, which took me about a year to do. So, you know, these projects that I'll work on a little bit every day for a year or 2 years, you know. I recently discovered, this is really nerding out, but I recently discovered this guy named Miles Okazaki.
Yeah.
Do you guys know that name?
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
I'm friends with Miles.
Yeah.
Well, I'll plug his book.
You have his book? Yeah.
You know this book? It's called The Fundamentals of Guitar.
Yeah.
And this book is like, this will be the last book that I ever buy on guitar, ever. That'll keep me busy for a year. But again, the reason that I got that book was that I saw a YouTube video of him demonstrating something in the book, and I just couldn't understand what was happening at all, like how he was doing it. It struck me in a way that it was like, I couldn't figure out what was going on, but it also sounded incredibly interesting at the same time. Like it wasn't just like some exercise that it's like, oh God, you know, kill me now after 5 minutes of hearing it or something. It was actually something like, I'd listen to a record that sounded like that, you know. So
he took 3 years out of his life just to do that book. Just that was all I think.
I believe that, because that is a labor of love for sure.
Yeah.
I've never seen anything in depth like that before.
Speaking of rigorous, right? One of the things that I'm facing now is that I used to be kind of like a point of pride with me that I never plugged in, you know, when I was playing electric guitar at home. Just never plugged in. I didn't want to make any noise. I didn't want to bother. I don't know what it was. And then about, well, less than 2 months ago, I don't know, a month and a half ago, one of the things I was going to do online was for the Corbett versus Dempsey online gallery website concert series they were calling Sequester Fest. So I got asked to play half an hour of solo guitar. Solo guitar is the most terrifying thing for me to do. And 2 members of Wilco, Glenn Cochie and Jeff Tweedy, also were going to play half-hour sets solo. And but I really wanted to play this guitar that's very hard to play, this little airline guitar that I put flat wounds on. It sounds really like a beautiful old jazz guitar, but even though it's this little cheapo, I don't even know if it's 3/4 scale. It might be half scale. It's really hard to play because it's so small. But the only way I could even approach playing it was to plug it in, because that's when this guitar has the personality that I'm wanting to bring out. So I plugged in and started playing at home through an amplifier for the first time regularly in maybe 30 years. And I think maybe I really made a mistake not plugging in all these years. Because I was working on the touch on the guitar and thinking about I don't know. So, so maybe that's my new goal, is to try to remember to plug in once in a while, so I can actually be thinking about my sound instead of just thinking I'll play when I get there. I'll plug in when I get to the gig. Oops.
I mean, yeah, it goes both ways, right? Because there's like a certain amount of, you should get the sound from your instrument first. But then on the other hand, you're rarely performing or playing without an amp. So the amp is sort of an extension of the instrument in a way. It's an electric guitar. So the amp is a part of the sound. There's so much you can do with both,
That's right.
Yeah. That's amazing that we're talking about this. I was literally just watching an interview with Wes Montgomery the other night on YouTube. And he talks about, have you seen this interview? He talks about
the
exact same thing. How he talks about how he baited himself into a corner because he ended up practicing for this long stretch without the amp. And then he plugged into the amp after working on all this stuff. And he's like, well, that doesn't sound anything like what I've been working on, totally different.
Wow.
Yeah, I got to say something about Wes really quick, because when I was one of the teachers I had was Ted Dunbar when I first moved.
Oh man, yeah.
And talk about a book. I mean, that started saying, I don't want to say the bad word, but that man had some books that are so heavy, but he's got like pentagrams and all kinds of. But anyway, he was like best friends with Wes, and he played with his thumb. Ted Dunbar.
Yep. That's
and
right.
he was apparently he was best friends with Wes. They were in the same town, and he said the reason why Wes played with his thumb was because in order for him, he had many kids, I don't know how many, he had five kids.
Yeah.
He worked at a factory until he didn't even record a record till he was in his 40s or something like that, right? He worked at a factory so he could support his family, and the only time he could practice was 1 a.m. or 12, midnight until 5 a.m. when he had to go to work, and then he worked all day. So he didn't want to wake up his kids. So he spent 15 years just practicing really quietly with his thumb. And that was sort of what Ted had said about him.
Yeah.
That's sort of interesting insight,
Oh, I love Ted Dunbar, man. I mean, that's amazing. I had great to hear that name, because very few people are aware of Ted Dunbar. And every once in a while, I play sometimes with Jeff Parker, who's one of my favorite guitar players and an incredible composer and producer too. And Jeff, I don't know, after years of playing on and off together, I asked him one day, I said, how about Ted Dunbar? Absolutely loves Ted Dunbar. And I can sort of hear in Jeff, I hear some Ted, I hear certainly Grant Green in his playing, but it just made my heart feel really nice to have a chat about Ted Dunbar. Now you're talking about Ted Dunbar, and I don't know if anybody remembers him. I became aware of him because of that second version of the Tony Williams Lifetime, the Ego album.
Yeah.
And I still think, even though it was probably, I feel like Tony probably said, okay, here's this huge amplifier, stand in front of it behind my drums, which is where they were set up. Don Elias and Warren Smith and Tony are in front. It's a huge percussion situation. And then Larry Young, Khalid Yassine, and Ted Dunbar. And for a minute, Junie Booth on Fender bass, trying to play Fender bass. He didn't seem to last long, but they're all behind him, right? So Ted's playing with his guitar really low at an angle, and like a hollow body 175 or something, and this huge amp behind him, so he's feeding back the whole time. I think it was a very uncomfortable moment for him, probably, to try to be this jazz rock guy that he was not. But there's something about what he played in that band that really speaks to me, and I think it's still one of the coolest bands that ever existed. They took down a lot of the YouTube clips of that band for some reason, but there's still one, I think, from Paris I feel like everybody should check out. The second edition, the non-John McLaughlin Larry Young-ish edition of Tony Williams' lifetime,
Yeah.
and the non-Alan Holdsworth lifetime. It just, those are all, of course, amazing bands too. But the Ego Band just sort of never got its due, and I just love listening to that.
Yeah, I have to say, just because he passed away while I was studying with him, and I mean, one of the most just incredible teachers I've ever had. You know, he had me like, I mean, he was so serious about music. He had me like crying at like, you know, I think I was probably 19 or something, you know, in his lesson, you know, just, I mean, he was so like, he was such a servant of the music, you know, and he was on a mission to have guitar players get out of the guitar player mindset, you know, like he really wanted his whole thing, you know, when you study, this is interesting things, you know, about it, just music education, but there's no sort of guitar role in the orchestra or first guitar in the band, you know. And so when you learn a violin or a trumpet, you know, you go to class and you're already reading music and you're already sort of having really intense rudimentary lessons, you know. Whereas guitar, you sort of just pick it up, you hear the records, you hear the Ramones, you know, you want to pop out, you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, like it's not the same kind of thing as it is with the horn, just by evolution, you know. And so he was a really influential and should be sought out by any guitar serious. I think any guitar player should check him out, like as you said. But let's, you know, I don't mean to talk too much about him, but yeah.
Now he has a beautiful record on, I think it was on the Xanadu label. It's a really nice photograph of him too. It's just, well, from the 70s, but might be 1980. It's good, really good. I wish I'd had a good guitar teacher.
A lot of my students are trying to sound like you, so.
Oh my God. Oh my God, that's crazy.
The talk of practice and teachers makes me want to lead into the kind of focusing on music education. So if we think about your music education as a youth, are there memorable moments that stand out for you? Like maybe there was a particular lesson that left a mark?
I got lucky, and it's not a guitar teacher story, and I'll make this brief because I know I talk a lot, but I had the desire to learn theory and to learn what I thought were what I called jazz chords, and I wanted to learn to read music. And in high school, it was too late. I was told it was too late, but I sort of persisted and took Baroque harmony class, and I played in the jazz band in my senior year in high school, and I just wasn't getting it. And like the guy who ruined me for sight reading, he was teaching me chords without any theory. So he also hadn't taught me the notes on the guitar. So I taught myself the notes on the guitar, and I taught myself how to use all my fingers, mainly from seeing like Julian Bream or classical guitar players, and Steve Howe with Yes, who had this amazing all fingers technique up and down the guitar. And I was quite enamored of his style and sound and his hands. And but because I didn't know why a C was called a C, I didn't know what a triad was, I didn't know anything. I was a philosophy major. Now, this is what you might find interesting, Stephanie, because I was told it was too late to be a music major, even though I knew I wanted to play music for the rest of my life. And after a year of philosophy, I said, this is ridiculous. And I went to a community college. I went to a fancy college, you know, I had good grades and all that stuff. I went to a community college and I started over, and I had a theory teacher whose son is quite well known. His name's John Beasley. He's a keyboard player, band leader in Los Angeles, famous these days for the Monkestra. But his father, whose real name is Rule Beasley, he was a theory teacher and a bassoonist and a composer, and his name is Rule Beasley. And he changed my life because through his very clear and measured style of teaching, I got it. I got what I needed to learn. and I started to excel at understanding and manipulating music from a theoretical standpoint. And I later applied that to original music, and I met a man named Eric Von Essen, who kind of pushed me further, a multi-instrumentalist that kind of was my musical partner for maybe 17 years. And so Rule Beasley, Santa Monica College, and I think I ran into John Beasley in Berlin about 4 years ago, and he was doing Munkestra, and his dad was still alive then at 88 or something. So I'm hoping he's still around, because that was what I learned, was theory, and it changed my life.
Thank you.
Yeah, I had a couple of good. It's kind of tough for me to choose one example of this, because I grew up in a super small town in Jersey. Like, it was a public high school, and there were about 30 kids that I graduated with in my class. So it was small, and music was not like a thing that many people were into at my school. So I didn't know how to fit in or anything. But I had a great teacher there, Dr. Smith. He would just let me come down to the music room and use one of the practice rooms at study halls and this, that, and the other. So I was down there practicing all the time, like, once I picked up the guitar, and that was great. But the lesson that I always think of came in college, or that I'll choose to zoom in on, came in college from a guy named Gene Bertoncini.
Oh, man.
Was just,
got his book.
Got his, right? Exactly.
I didn't even know he had a book. I just have his record.
I took some lessons with him as well. Yeah, he was a really sweet guy.
I was just going to say, exactly, right? It's like, he's one of these guys that I just feel really lucky that my life, even if it hadn't been for the guitar stuff that I learned from him, I just took so much from just being like a human, a good,
really humble. He was really humble.
Planet. Yeah, just so genuine and very straight to the point, and he'll give it to you straight, but not like ever being a dick about it, But he would tell you how it was, straight up. And there was one lesson that I had with him that I do think of often, where he said, "Okay, well, play something for me." Maybe it was the very first lesson that I had with him, actually, because he wanted to see me play something. It was just me and him in this practice room, and I started playing, and he stopped me after about 30 seconds, and he was like, "Okay, hold on." He's like, "You got to stop." And he said, "Man, you're just trying way too hard." He's like, "I'm going to break out in a rash just watching."
Yeah, he's like a really East Coast kind of guy or something.
Yeah. I mean, and he said, "Just listen." He's like, "People, you don't have to do so much." And he said something along the lines of like, people love music and they love the guitar. So you have to let the music and the guitar do the work for you. Like, let that stuff work for you. Like, you don't have to do everything. And then he elaborated on it. We talked a little bit more about it. And he said, when you're playing with a band, keeping that in mind, that like people love the sound of just bass and drums or other instruments. So, the lesson I got from it is that even if you're soloing, or if you're, if the spotlight's on you or whatever, if it's your highlighted moment, music is enough to get you through it. You don't have to feel all the pressure in the world to, carry the whole thing on your back. And I think about that all the time. Like, even like when I'm driving around the city or something, I'm like, do I need to be like gripping the steering wheel quite this tight? Or, am I holding this fork too tight? All these things.
Wow, that's beautiful.
I really attribute all that back to that moment with this guy, Gene Bertoncini, who, if anybody who's watching this, obviously these guys know, but you should do yourselves a favor, anybody who doesn't know who he is, because it's really very, very high level music making.
Yeah.
Scott, you've mentioned a couple of times of ways that kind of music has taught you lessons that have carried over into other parts of your life, right? Like driving and sobriety. I'm wondering if Ari and Nels, do you feel that way? Right? Has playing the guitar helped you in other areas of your life in any way?
Yeah, I also want to say a little bit about the education thing, but I'll say yes. I've done. I mean, I'm just going to be honest. I've experimented with various things throughout my life. I won't go into depths about that, but I am, sober these days. But I think that ultimately the highest high I've ever had and the most incredible feelings I've had in my entire life have ultimately been through music or through thinking about music or what I can do with music expressively or playing music. It's intoxicating, and it can be. And I think like it ends up that there's certain things that might open up doors to to getting there, but ultimately the music itself and life itself and all those things are the coolest of all things about that. I guess I'll come back to the music education thing so I can pass the torch on this one.
I don't know if it helped me in life, but the thing is that I've only wanted to do this. And a lot of people I know are extremely interesting, brilliant people, don't know what they want to do. So I've wanted to know. I've wanted to do this since I was 12 years old, and the first inkling of music as I guess you could call it a spiritual endeavor or something beyond entertainment. I became aware of it at age 10 when I heard Ravi Shankar in my elementary school class. In elementary school, we used to study, I don't know if people do this now, but we'd study different units and like maybe in the fourth grade, it was Japan, or in the third grade, it was Mexico, but in the fifth grade, it was India. And our teacher, Miss Godwin, who I'll never forget, and she looked a lot like John Lennon, played an entire side of Ravi Shankar live on old World Pacific record on the Caliphone, school turntable, whatever. And I was absolutely transfixed and wanted to play sitar. I wanted to play Indian music. But then I read My Music, My Life, and Ravi Shankar describes the rigors of learning his instrument and Indian classical music, and I said, man, there's no way I'm doing that. Learning to sit with the instrument for a year before you play it and things like that. I was like, I'm gonna go get an electric guitar and be cool, But that sound and that learning about the commitment and the discipline that the people in the Indian classical music world engage in, that was the first inkling of what music, I guess, that all of us are talking about really is, which is it's magic. It's like the kind of thing that you can sustain your whole life, and so I don't know if it enabled me to be ready for anything else in life, but at least I have known all this time that it's all I want to do, and that's pretty liberating.
Thank you for that. Ari, did you say you wanted to come back to something?
Oh, well, I mean, I just wanted to, give a nod to some of my teachers and talk about just, I had some amazing teachers. This teacher, Milo Peterson, in town, and this band director, Scott Brown. I got very lucky in that, as I was going from middle school to high school, I was sort of haphazardly walking the halls the summer before high school because I was doing football, and I heard this jazz band playing down the hall, and I walked in the room, and it just so happened their guitar player was graduating, and a friend of mine was also was coming into the jazz band, and they were rehearsing, and I said, this is a class, like you can take this class, and it was just beautiful. They were playing big band music, and they're like, yeah, we're leaving for Europe tomorrow, but we'll be back in a month and we'll have some auditions. I just couldn't believe, they're going to Europe and it's a class. It just so happened that Roosevelt and Garfield, these two high schools in my town, were sort of these arch rival jazz band classes. And this teacher, Scott Brown, was just one of the most amazing teachers I've ever had. The way he just put that band in shape, and watching him every day while trying to play some Count Basie guitar. I just had great teachers, so many over the years from a young age. I can't list them all. And then, going to college, I think in Scott, you went to school, so similar thing, but in college, having just the most amazing teachers of all time, and not just learning about music, but learning about life. And I also just am an advocate for kids taking lessons, because when you have a teacher that you see once a week, someone outside your family, you're doing music, it's a cool person you get to interact with, and there's so many lessons you can learn through music about life, just how to accomplish. Like, some people have different ways of learning, and it's just as you navigate that process of tackling something, like Scott said, that I think we can all relate to. It can take a long time. You listen to something you want to do, and it might take you a year, 2 years, 6 months, 2 months to get there where you can actually accomplish it. But in that activity of dissecting something that's difficult, figuring out how to do it, and giving it 2 months to a year to get there, and tackling things one way at a time through music, you can just learn so much about becoming a better person and progressing. And so just a huge advocate for music and education.
Wonderful.
That's one of the things I've been hearing from all three of you, right? The importance of the student-teacher relationship and the transformative power that music education can have. And that's actually what we're here today to celebrate, right? Is supporting music education in the United States for children, when instruction programs are often have to struggle for funding.
Absolutely.
Which I'm sure many of us are all too familiar with. So one of the things I wanted to ask you all is what's your best argument for the importance of music education when you're trying to advocate for programs for children? Does that make sense? Maybe pretend I'm a critic. I'm a school administrator who wants to cut the band program. What would you come back with to argue that I shouldn't do that?
Well, I mean, for me, it's maybe it's a very selfish sort of answer, but I think that these guys would agree. I mean, anybody that this is, anything music related has turned into my entire life. Everything in my life, like all my friends, for the most part, all of, a lot of the lessons that I've learned, a lot of the mentors that I've had in my life through the years and whatnot, they've all one way or another come through music. And that sort of journey started when I was a young kid. And the fact that I had the opportunity to, if I hadn't had the opportunity to have a Mr. Smith letting me into the practice rooms, during study halls and whatnot, and or had the opportunity to, I went to a college in Paterson, New Jersey called William Patterson, and studied jazz there. And, I came from, pretty humble means, and I had to have some help to get in to get through that, school. So I had help, a scholarship. Yeah. And, if I hadn't had those opportunities, my life would, I don't know who I'd be. Yeah. Really. So that would be my answer. And what kind of monster doesn't want to support music or the arts? I mean, it's beyond my comprehension that it's difficult. I know it is to get funding, but it's something I'll never understand.
I would say, like, in one sentence, math and science, language arts will exercise the brain, and music and the arts will exercise the heart and soul. And in my mind, and it also sort of ties into math and science as well. And I think that education is education. It doesn't matter what you're studying, but that would be my one sort of sentence. I think, yeah, I mean, I for me, I can't understand why somebody wouldn't want to prioritize it, but I could if you need somebody to lobby for you, I'm one phone call away. That's great. That's cool, Scott. I didn't know you went to William Patterson. I think I was probably at Rutgers at the same time, because I went to Rutgers for 1 year. So
I was going to say, is that because that's how I know Ted Dunbar's?
Yeah, I was there when he was there. So probably around the same time.
Yeah.
Nels?
Oh, I feel a little tongue-tied because I didn't, until Rule Beasley, I didn't really benefit directly from music education in my high school, but they had music. And before I was in the jazz band, my twin brother Alex was in the band the whole time. And the 2 years before I was in the band with him, the band was extremely good. And there were some amazing musicians. And the teacher had some amazing music he had written. His name was John Magruder, and he had played with Don Ellis for many years and written charts for Don Ellis. So there was plenty of odd meter stuff. But the tragedy of funding being not just reduced, but eventually just cut in Los Angeles City school system led him to be a math teacher. No more music, none. And I feel that our society, if we don't embrace culture, that we are going to suffer, as Ari, as you mentioned, spiritually, because not everybody's going to be an artist, not everybody's going to be a musician, but to have the option, to have that door be able to be opened just in case, and to have that be valued is something that I feel is being lost, because it's very abstract to try to explain to somebody in a nuts and bolts way what's good about playing music. All you hear about is, oh, it's so difficult and hardly anyone ever makes it, or it's just some sort of I don't know. It's like it seems frivolous, or I don't know. I didn't have to fight my parents to play music, nor did my brother, because my parents were both school teachers in the LA City school system and loved art and music. And so they had a very high regard for that kind of endeavor. And I feel lucky that I didn't have to rebel. I didn't have to say, like, well, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to be a doctor, or, like so many people I know did. And if we could just take that whole battle off the table and just let people, expose people to pretty much everything, which is what I think this school is supposed to be, and let people choose, who knows what could happen. But we're now monetizing everything, and everything's become, it's important to survive. Certainly it's not easy. The path to being a musician that is able to pay the bills is not an easy one. But the fulfillment that we've all described here is probably so much greater than that of a lifetime of some kind of job that you're not passionate about, that maybe people ought to think about it more seriously and think about what our society could benefit from in this regard. And my only experience as an adult has been trying to help out the Brooklyn Music School, which was right near where we used to live, and I don't mean BAM, but I mean the Brooklyn Music School, which is a community music school where they basically teach kind of music fundamentals to all ages. So you could be a senior and go in there. You could be mom and dad can go in there, kids, little kids, and their whole idea is to just let people enjoy music and teach them as much as they want to learn. And to me, this makes so much sense because it also brings families together. It brings the community together. And that is something that's an outgrowth of all kinds of culture, not just music. And in the United States of America, I feel we've become suspicious of all kinds of culture as though it's some kind of scam, or so, like we're being ripped off somehow because it's, you can't look at it in a concrete way and monetize it automatically or something. And I think this is, to speak again to what Ari said, this is like ripping the heart and soul out of the culture, out of our society. And we just need to encourage people to be themselves, right?
Oh yeah.
But if you take music away, I mean, everyone loves music, right? I mean, just about, except for, Nabokov, I mean, he struggled, but his son became a singer, I think, an opera singer or something. But anyway, it's not for absolutely everyone, but you know how many people have said they can't really make it through the day without, quote unquote, their music. Without my music, I'm unhappy. Without my music, I don't know what to do, or I don't feel like me, or whatever it is. It's a very powerful, beautiful thing. And I just wish we could just embrace artistic endeavor in general instead of feeling like, and I think it's very peculiar to Americans to look at it askance and with some sort of suspicion, when in reality, look at what it's done for the three of us here sitting here talking.
There's so much to say, but I mean, one thing I'd say, it just baffles me that there's so much money out there. There's so many resources. I mean, we have infinite amounts of resources, and we're not asking for a huge percentage here. We're getting a very small percentage, and the amount of percentage that people are willing to invest of their own money and sometimes is also baffling to me, like the way that music is sort of given out free. And oftentimes I'm playing at a club and people walk by and they have $10 cover charge, and I don't want to pay $10, I just wanted to come in and have some drinks or something, but it's like, or the way that musicians get paid in some gigs. I just don't know why there isn't, just scrape off like a little bit off the top of the multi-billions of dollars out there, and I think it should be invested in something worthy. Music is on the top of the list.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah.
How about for our last question? We briefly put you all in kind of the educator role. Can you speak to the kids who are watching, right, or the teenagers, the young musicians? What advice do you have for them? I mean,
Since no one's jumping in, find a teacher, spend time playing your instrument. If you enjoy playing, play it. If you find something that brings you joy, oftentimes you hear these cliches, but as you go through life, they become more and more true. You don't, if you find something you're passionate about, you could go through your whole life working a job you don't like with, all your time and look back and wish you'd done more stuff you love. And, but finding a teacher, practicing, just practice, even if it's tough, even if it's a tough thing to get better, it's a practice. And I guarantee anyone that if they put the time in, it's going to come back. And I would say, if it was up to me, I would say everyone should play a musical instrument, and everyone should learn about music. It's a language. It's a universal language. It's a language that, in my opinion, trumps words in many ways. And I think it's a beautiful thing to be able to tap into that way of communicating and that way of enjoying life. And I would say also, if you don't find that passion in music and you want to play, it's not going to hurt you, and it's certainly going to add to your life. And if you find something you are passionate about, no matter what it is, it could be sports, it could be video games, whatever it is you love to do, go down that path. And there's just a ton of value to have, no matter where you are on the spectrum, but of music appreciation at any age. It's a wonderful thing to do. And I'm sure if you're into music, there's people out there that would love to talk to you more about music and help you further along your progress. And you know, just if you like it, do it. You know, I guess that's what I would say.
That's great. Yeah, I totally agree, but I think that's great. It's a great answer. I guess just to add on to that, what would I say? I would say, I think that there's a real importance in finding a crew of people that you could see yourself growing with as a musician through the years, or just finding a community of people to make music with that you feel inspired with, and you feel like that you're muy simpatico with, I guess, in ways. I'm very lucky that I'm right now I'm in a phase where I'm playing in a band with guys that I've been playing with since I was 19, 20 years old, which is amazing. That's like 25 years almost. And I'm a much different, I don't know who I would be as a musician and as a person, but you know, on topic as a musician, if I wasn't informed by those guys, playing with those same guys for all of these years. You know, they've changed the kind of musician that I am, because we sort of grown together as a crew of players. And to me, that's something that I feel incredibly fortunate to have, because I don't know if everybody has that. And that's really one of the great things of music, is growing as a musician. And if you can grow as a musician with other people, I think that it has that much more of an impact on everything.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad to hear that, because I think I would have overlooked this, Scott. But I was lucky because my twin brother is a monster drummer, and who's always really good from the very beginning. I could always play with him. So I always had at least one person to play with, but who was completely in the same zone aesthetically as I was. And so we moved forward together for decades, you know. And I think I took it for granted until you said that, you know, just to not that it happened. I didn't take that for granted, but to mention it. I don't think I would have thought to mention it. And
well, it's funny that, you know, I'm an only child, so I never had that sort of connection with somebody growing up where it was a constant thing. And then B, a lot of the guys that I'm talking about, like Joe and Marco, the people that you know, they were into music that I'm not into, that I was not into at the time. You know, I remember I met Joe and I was like, hey, I love Fairport Convention. And he's like, I love Rush. I was like, I don't know if this is going to work out. But now, you know, but over the years, it's kind of turned into this weird thing where it's informed me in different ways. Anyway, not to cut you off.
Oh, no. But you know, when we're young, we can be very doctrinaire, you know, because our tastes are kind of how we define ourselves in some regards. So yeah, but, you know, but in the case of my brother, we're identical twins, so there's definitely some sort of weird, you know, very connected energy there that's unique. But I don't know any other way to be. You know, people used to ask me, what's it like being an identical twin? I was like, well, I don't remember my past lives, so I don't know. It seems great. You know, people look at you weird when you're a kid and say all kinds of stupid things to you, but that could happen to anybody, you know. But to say something about education and just about guitar, I just have this cliche that I tell people, my personal cliche. One is find a working guitar, pick the number of strings that you think might work, tune it the way you want, and just never look back. But if you want to play with other people, you're going to have to learn some stuff. You're going to have to learn some chords, some theory, learn how songs are put together or whatever it is, how to listen while you're playing to other people.
Yeah.
And but if you don't want to do that and you want to just blaze your own path, you're going to get a lot of guff, you're going to take a lot of grief from people, but you may change the culture forever. It's just going to be a tougher path. and I would thank you for that. You know, and the other thing I tell them is, look, I didn't really start making a decent living and be sort of, I don't know, whatever success means, successful until I was almost 50 years old. So maybe don't give up's the other thing. You know, perseverance.
Don't give up. I think. Oh, go ahead, Ari.
Just on what Scott said, yeah, like and Nels as well. I mean, I think it's a thread, but yeah, hanging out with my really close friends, and you know, ninth grade, eighth grade, and taking a bus all day, you know, with my amp to get there and jam and downstairs, or just hanging out with friends and playing certainly is some of the greatest memories, and that can continue lifelong as well, just like Scott mentioned. I would say for someone who wants to play with people, you know, you don't need lessons. You know, it's just sort of like you don't need to go to college to become, you know, successful financially or whatever you want. But you know, I'd say one thing you should focus on is your rhythm. I think a lot of guitar players spend so much time getting the notes, and the rhythm is what allows you to lock up with other people, you know, and have that be on the same page. So just as a quick tip of sorts, you know, is yeah, playing with other people and go focus on your rhythm too, you know.
Playing time.
Yeah.
Right. The guitar is ultimately a percussion instrument, right?
Right.
It's in the rhythm section.
Nels, Scott, Ari, thank you so much for sharing your experience and wisdom with us today. It's been an honor and a privilege to participate in this dialogue with you.